ahead and get started. Want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Mike Morgan. I'm the chair of APA DC. If you're not familiar with APA, it's your first time joining us. We're a nonprofit trade organization that's built by photographers and run for photographers. We do a ton of education. We also do advocacy work for the industry. So if you're not a member, but would definitely recommend looking into joining. It's chapters all across the country, and you could help support an organization that's helping to support your industry as well. We've got a couple of events coming up, in-person events in DC. We've got our monthly coffee break this Saturday at the Kogod Courtyard at the National Portrait Gallery. And then we're having a members-only barbecue and picnic. That's going to be on the 23rd. We've got another coffee break for August. I believe that one we're going to be doing photo books. And then we'll have August 9th, we have a happy hour and a celebration for the recipient of our LGBTQ IAP Plus grant. So that should be very exciting. Everyone's welcome to join us for that. We have then August 14th, another 30 minutes with Tina Liu. Who's an editorial photographer and creative director, and also does business consulting. Then in September, we have 30 minutes with Kurth Bob, portrait photographer here in DC. We've got a couple other events that we have in the pipeline, one coming up in Baltimore that's not totally ready to announce yet, but that'll be like an estimating workshop with Limonada Creative and Prop Shop Baltimore. Then September 30th will be the coffee break. Oh, that's the photo book meetup at the National Portrait Gallery. But we'll be announcing a bunch of other events, business education events, a number of things that we're pulling together. So again, go back to our member benefits and discounts. If you are a member, please always double check, make sure on APA that if you're making purchases or whatever, check at the APA first, see if you get a discount. Obviously, we've got all kinds of great things that we offer our members. And if you are interested in becoming a member, our very own Sam Levitan is our membership chair. So Sam can certainly hook you up with membership, and we have a $20 off discount code for any level. It's DC1 for 20. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the star of today, Sam. Sorry not to make you more nervous, but Sam, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself. We have in the chat, if anybody would like to put questions there, we'll have a Q&A at the very end. Okay, thanks again, everybody, for being here. And Sam, go ahead and take it away.
Let me see if I can get the screen share to work. So here we go. Is it working for everyone? Great. Well, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate you all coming. Thanks for the introduction, Mike. So welcome to my talk, Freelance Photography for Universities 101. Hope you brought your number 2 pencil. So a little background about me. I've been a professional photographer since 2002, first in Chicago for 5 years, then Long Island for 6. And now I've been in Maryland for the past 10, and universities and nonprofits have been part of my client base from the very beginning. Done the wrong thing. So I really love working for universities because you get to be a Swiss Army knife of photographers. Pretty much any discipline you could think of, you get to work in. There's consistent work because universities have a constant need for new work, new visuals. There are tons of events, and it's predictable work that comes on a regular schedule. Also, notable, interesting people come to visit, and the schools want to have those visits documented for history, press, and marketing. So I really like that I get paid to listen to smart people talk. And as you develop a deep relationship with the universities and demonstrate your knowledge of their institution, they will keep calling because it's easier than explaining to someone new. And there are many networking opportunities that you can leverage to get more work, either as people move from one university to another, or other people, alums and donors and stuff that you get to meet along the way. So of course, there's some caveats. University procurement systems and bureaucracies can sometimes be a pain, which should be of no surprise to anyone. Some universities have a defined rate structure that you're locked into as a freelancer, but usually they make up for it in volume. Licensing terms generally have to be fairly flexible because the images go into an uncontrolled environment, and legal doesn't want to worry if some grad student used an image in a PowerPoint and now they have to pay thousands of dollars for it. Also, some institutions, departments within an institution are very knowledgeable, great to work with, Marcom departments, that sort of thing. But others don't have much experience working with creatives or outside vendors. I've even had to walk through some on how to pay an invoice to an outside vendor, and it was fun. And certain times of the year are crazy busy. Think graduation time. I'll go through that at the end of the presentation, where I give a walkthrough of the last 2 weeks of May and how insane that is. But it's generally a lot of fun. So as I said, like these are some of the disciplines that I get to work in. Obviously, the classroom stuff, the students on the lawn with autumn leaves studying, in the dorm rooms, celebrations like graduation, sporting events, although I don't do too many of those, but they're fun on occasion. Performances, all the STEM stuff. I spend a lot of time in labs with people holding up test tubes and all that sort of stereotypical stuff. Universities like to document their facilities and their buildings and any signage. So I do a bunch of that. Some universities that I work with have working farms. I really enjoy that work because I also shoot some agriculture. There's product work for new like swag and branding materials and that sort of thing. Lots of fundraising events. I spend a lot of time at cocktail parties. And on occasion, really interesting people come to visit. So this was an event with then Vice President Joe Biden that was co-hosted by the George Washington University and the University of Minnesota. And occasionally for universities that have medical centers, I've photographed live surgeries, which is something that I can do with a camera in front of my face, but not in real life. So I wanted to spend the next little bit talking about how I go through and prepare for some typical shoots that I do for universities. So I'll start off with how I cover a graduation. This was for Loyola University, Maryland, which was a new client to me back in May. So basically starts off with a call to go through who the important people are, whether the keynote speaker has any approvals that they need to go through to get the photos used, what the general flow of the day is, any of the logistics about parking and access to the building and that stuff. I get a run of show from the client so that I know where I need to be and when. And then I build a shot list in the Notes app on my phone so that I could follow along, but also share the note with the client. If they're helping wrangle people, they can follow along and check people off as well. So that's really handy. Then I go through and put that run of show into my calendar and put the notes in the notes field so that I could see it on my watch and have easy access to it along the way. And now we get started. When I arrive, go through general details, a lot of pictures of the staff volunteers that they can use for training materials. So how the commencement services are set up and people putting on the regalia and all that sort of stuff. A lot of documenting of the branding that they put out and people interacting with the branding. And of course, happy graduates lining up and with their friends. I'm always looking for little bits of branding in there. So in this case, I was caught by the students' green shoes that matched the Loyola green. And of course, because it's graduation, you have to get the caps and other little details that I see. And then I go back and I focus on the professors for a while, putting on their regalia that is distinctive to the institutions that they went to. And then, of course, the president of the university and whatever VIPs and dignitaries. So this is where that shot list comes through, where we were basically planted the president in one spot and moved everyone into place. It was time to line up, and I get to run ahead while they basically chase after me. And my goal is to capture the emotion and the big moments of the day. I'm not often tasked to get each graduate as they cross the stage, which is a good thing because in this particular case, there were 1,300 graduates and it took 75 minutes. But I am tasked to go back and make sure that I capture the moments of the key people, like in this case, the honorary doctorate and his speech, and the first time that they putted doctoral graduates on stage. But other than that, it's looking for happy moments. I like to find pictures of people with fun hair, all those little details that they wanted, like the handshakes and the hugs, and people outside celebrating. Lays seem to be a big thing this year. This student appeared to have all of them, but I saw them again at other graduations that I covered later in the week. So another big one that I do are like image library days for marketing departments. So this is for the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. They bring me down a couple times a year to do these sorts of shoots in Charlottesville, and we also do some up in their campus in Roslyn. And it's very similar to how I do the graduation, where I put where I'm going to be at any particular time into my calendar, because sometimes the graduators
That's
with me.
okay. They can't see me either, which is better.
They can know.
But I can hear.
So we start off the day, with doing pictures of the grounds and people arriving on campus. Again, I'm always looking for people in their branded outfits and that sort of thing. They love that. Moving into the classrooms, every year we pick a new set of professors to focus on, whether it's they're new to the program or they haven't been photographed in a while. I'm looking for the happy, engaged faces in the class, and people, of course, in any branded outfits, that sort of thing. We moved out to First Coffee, which is something that they do in the lobby every day, I think at like 9 or 9:30. In this case, we picked out some students that we were going to focus on so that we could intentionally put some branding in there and get some faces that we knew would work for our marketing materials. Had them meet with the professor outside and that sort of thing. Again, back to classes, it's a lot of flip-flopping between class and portraits of professors, like this one, which is for the alumni magazine. And you'll see how we use that later. More portraits of students. Back into the classroom again and photographing some of the traditions. Some of the cohorts developed their own thing, and so I think it was this person's birthday, so she got to wear a bright orange birthday beehive, which she clearly looks thrilled about. Then more pictures of professors, and we're doing these all pretty quick before getting into the Career Center for a resume workshop and meeting with the career counselors. And because it's a business school, it's of course very important that we show these sorts of things for their career engagement and their recruiting. And it also happened to be a day that Deloitte was there doing a recruitment fair, so that meant we got to photograph a lot of handshakes, which they use a lot. As I roam free around the campus, sort of in between these assignments, I get a lot of these sorts of details with the buildings out of focus, and they use them for the in memoriam section of the alumni magazine and background page, that sort of thing. Then we wound up the day doing some group portraits of women in the program that would be used to highlight the growth of women in the Darden class. So this is how they use one of those images, and this is how they use that portrait of the professor earlier. So next, I'm going to take you through how I do an alumni portrait. So I've been very lucky to get a bunch of calls recently from Clemson University. I did another one yesterday. They always send me some really interesting people to photograph. This was back in March when they hired me to photograph Mohammed Abdelkader, who's the Chief Innovation Officer for USAID. As usual, when we photograph an alum in DC, they wanted to have that DC vibe and something showing that he works internationally and has innovation. And thankfully, the Ronald Reagan building where he's headquartered has a lot of those features. So I knew as I planned the shoot that I didn't have a lot of time. I needed to move fast. I wanted to work in a few locations so that I could give them some options. So I designed a pretty lightweight shoot, scouted, my plan for the day, starting inside and working our way out so we could maximize our time and not have to go through security too much and use that, have that work against us. And at that point, I was ready to go. Here's my assistant at the time, who's another APA member, Zach Arctander, basically holding the only light that we used, which was just 8200 on a stick with a collapsible umbrella, and that got us through the whole day. So we started off in that big atrium, doing one shot here that kind of has a cathedral vibe to it. Just turned them a little bit to work in the flags if they wanted to do more of the focus more of on the international relations aspect. I really liked the sort of neon light structure behind him, so I just kept him in one spot and I went downstairs and shot up, and then into one of the long corridors to get another option with the flags before we moved outside to get a few with the DC looking architecture. And then this is how they laid out the article. So they went with the first one, which I thought was a great choice. So next set, I'm kind of basically just run through things fairly quickly, not give as in-depth, but show you some other interesting assignments that I've done that I thought you'd enjoy. Another one for Clemson, where we photographed Carrie Dean, who was the head COVID testing coordinator for the Schubert Theaters on Broadway. And so Wasim, who's on the call, helped me out with this one. We got to play in an empty theater on a Monday when there were no shows. And then this is another one of their alums, Lauren Hereford. And she's a graphics producer at MSNBC. So we got to roam around 30 Rock and in the control rooms. And Adam was assisting me on that. He's on this call too. And that was a whole lot of fun. We only got yelled at a little bit. And this is how they laid everything out. So as I said, one of the fun things about being in the DC area is that universities from everywhere call me because there's always something interesting there, or someone interesting. So Illinois State University's hired me a couple of times. This was Donald McHenry, who was the US ambassador to the United Nations. I was really excited because he had a bright red door that was the Illinois State colors. That worked out really great until I closed the door behind us and we found out that his keys were inside, but thankfully his housekeeper was home to let us back in. This is Janelle Jones, who is the first Black female chief economist for the Department of Labor. So we did that last year. Brendan Wu for the University of Minnesota. This was a fun one. About 9 years ago, Carl Bernstein was visiting professor at Stony Brook University, and they were doing a piece on the 50th anniversary of Watergate and his involvement with the university. So we got to play at the sadly now defunct museum. John Marshall Law School sent me to photograph one of their alums who was the ambassador to the UN from Albania. So we got to play in the General Assembly Hall. I love doing advocacy day visits. This was with the University of Virginia's Batten School, visiting Tim Kaine. This was when Bill Clinton came to Stony Brook University, and his Secret Service agents are holding onto his belt to keep him from being pulled into the crowd. Dee Snyder from Twisted Sister coming to the NICU. I think he was doing work for March of Dimes at that point. This is Senator Chuck Schumer inside of a virtual reality colonoscopy. So you get to some really interesting places with these people. As I said earlier, a lot of universities that I work with have medical centers, so we get to photograph some of their really interesting technologies and training tools like the anatomically correct mannequins. So here's some nursing students learning how to intubate, which I remembered early on in COVID when that's all they were talking about. It does not look pleasant. Then just real quick, some ways that The images have been used in print for view books and other marketing materials over the years. Some more of the magazines for Darden and the employment reports. So these are those handshaking recruitment images that I showed you earlier, and pictures for the contents pages and all that. And similar stuff for Shepherd University, where we were fortunate to get a bunch of students to show up about a week early for school to get these out of the way. And then I'll wrap it up with basically how I spent the last 2 weeks of May and beginning of June, where I worked for 4 different universities, covered 5 university commencement ceremonies, 3 other university events, 3 days of marketing image library shoots, and 2 evenings consisting of 8 total reunion parties, plus a bunch of work for some other clients along the way. So starting off at Loyola was actually the beginning of that 2 weeks. And then I moved into Georgetown School of Medicine. You can see that I'm doing the same sort of thing as far as like, happy moments, but also things that would be useful for training volunteers that would help run the next one. There are dignitaries and famous babies and all those emotional moments. Moving on to Johns Hopkins, did 2 ceremonies for the School of Engineering, and in one day when it was quite hot. Again, lays are back in style at the doctoral hooding. And then a quick shoot for the University of Chicago. They had an event for their public policy school, a talk on effective government. So a lot of those sorts of things. I do talks mixed with cocktail receptions. Then more doctoral hoodings, this time for the cellular and developmental biology, professorship installation and cocktail hour. And then getting on to a really fun day, UVA is bringing up some work in Northern Virginia. So we were doing some branding for their new campus there in Fairfax. They were able to procure some models for us that were students and alums to come at 6:30 in the morning and walk around with us all over the mall, which was just so much fun. So we had a set in the morning. We took a break in the afternoon, and then started all over again with a whole new set in the afternoon that I'll get to in a second. Yeah, here they are. And over the course of the entire day, we walked about 8 miles. It got a lot of really fun stuff. We were able to move really quickly, and get a nice variety of images for the client. And then the next day we started up at the business school in Roslyn, doing similar stuff that I showed you back at Charlottesville, but in a smaller space. And then each night I went across the river to Georgetown to cover their reunion weekend, both events on campus and at the American History Museum. And then get a few hours of sleep and start all over again with more of the image library in Roslyn for UVA. And then going back down to across the river to Georgetown. And it was a whole lot of fun, but an exhausting 2 weeks. And so at this point, just wanted to thank APA DC for inviting me to do this. UPAA, which is the University Photographers Association. I know there are a few members on here, which I appreciate. You guys have been a great resource for knowledge sharing and referrals. Here's just a non-comprehensive list of the universities that I worked with over the past 21 years that I appreciate, as well as all the art directors, designers, fellow photographers, assistants, other members of the Marcom teams, development officers, administrators, faculty, students, and alums, and of course my family for putting up with me when I'm basically not sleeping and going to these things day after day. That's about it. I'm sure I talked way too fast for all of you, but I appreciate you listening, and there's how to connect with me if you want to after this is all wrapped up. Any questions?
That was fantastic, Sam. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think what we can do now is, folks, if you want to write any of your questions in the chat, and I'd like to go ahead and introduce Hana Leilati, one of our board officers, who will lead the Q&A.
Stop the screen share.
Great.
So I can see it.
All right. Nice job, Sam. That was so cool. All right. So I have a question. How did you get started doing university stuff? It seems like you've been doing it for a while, and I'm just curious where you started.
So I will say quite honestly, nepotism. So one of my early clients was the McCormick School of Engineering at Northwestern, and I got them entirely because my mom's best friend's daughter worked in the marketing department and was willing to give me a chance. And so I leveraged that work to get more. One of the other people I worked with in Chicago at the time worked with the John Marshall Law School, so I did work for them. When he couldn't make it, my wife was getting her PhD at the University of Chicago, so I did a little bit of work for them. And then when we moved to New York, when my wife got her first position, she's a professor, I should be upfront about that. I basically put together a little book of what I had done in Chicago, sent it over to the art director at Stony Brook University. Her name is Karen Leibowitz. With basically a note saying, I moved here for my wife. I have no other work. Please take mercy on me. And we had a lovely meeting where she said, well, we have staff photographers and some freelancers that we work with a lot. I can't guarantee anything, but I'll give you a call if something comes up. And then when I went back home after the meeting, the phone rang and she was like, can you be here tomorrow? And it kind of rolled from there. And then it's just been leveraging the work that I've done and the connections there, as well as UPAA has been a good source of referrals here too, because there'll be messages on their internal Facebook group was like, oh, is there someone that can photograph an alum in the DC area? And since so many universities have notable alums in this area, I do a lot of that and do a lot of 3-hour fundraising cocktail hours. It's kind of my bread.
Awesome. All right, looks like we have a couple questions. So here's one. I work with colleges in Los Angeles and often run into boilerplate contracts that are work for hire. I find it really difficult to negotiate out of these. What's been your experience with this?
Generally, it's difficult. What I negotiate for is basically portfolio rights for it. Because it's basically you've got to decide, do you want to do the work or not, and accept the volume of work. So there are some universities that I work for that they've got not only the sort of work for hire scenario, but also a predetermined rate for what they pay freelancers specifically to cover events. So you kind of, if you want that sort of volume of work, then you've got to agree to that. I use some of those as sort of filler between my bigger jobs. So, because it's work that I don't have to market myself for, someone's doing a lot of the pre-production work for it. So it's my costs for doing it are lower because I get like an assignment that says this is where to go, who your contacts are, sometimes the metadata for the images that they want put in and that sort of thing. And so some things are streamlined, but generally it's difficult to get around the rights thing. there are some universities that I work with that realize that what is better for them is a unlimited non-exclusive license, because they've talked to some of their freelancers, and if they want to do like a full buyout, that would be too expensive. But so that's the rate structure that they've negotiated. But a lot of them, particularly state universities, want it work for hire, but they are comfortable if you put them in your portfolio, especially after whatever piece it is has been published already.
Great. Okay. It's always a tricky
Yeah,
tricky
it's balancing
there.
volume of work versus the maximizing dollar per job, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So Adam is asking, when is your next job, Sam?
Next job, next university job is at the end of the month. The next job that I'm shooting, I'm covering an event at the Egyptian embassy tonight for a friend. So few hours.
Cool, you sound very busy. All right. Next question is, were photo opportunities plentiful when you got started in the university field, and how has that changed over time, or if it has? And do you have any advice for connecting with universities and getting started in the university photo industry?
So when I started, I was, got into Northwestern because of the family connection that I had. And I would say that the opportunities that I had there were similar to what I do now, only they were mostly focused on work that was going to end up in their alumni magazine and marketing materials. I would say as I got into things, I've been doing more events and both like university-wide events as well as fundraising events for the advancement departments and that sort of thing. So I would say, like, if you want to pick up more work, connecting with both the marketing and communications teams so they know that you exist, as well as the advancement and alumni relations teams, because they're often producing their own events and hiring photographers to cover those completely separately and oblivious to what the marketing and communications departments are doing. And as far as how things have changed over time, I would say that there seems to be a new trend where the university staff photographers are focusing more on a mission of marketing and strategic communications, and stuff like the events and alumni portraits and stuff is more likely to be kicked off to freelancers, which in some ways is good because you develop a relationship with internal departments. Whereas sometimes that you would just be on a list and whoever answers first gets the job. But you have the risk that you're sometimes working for a department that's putting on a small event and they're not necessarily as knowledgeable about how to process payments and invoices, and whether they can use their P card or they have to get a PO and cut a check or direct deposit and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
it's kind of like breaking into any industry. You need to get your foot in the door and then make a good impression, right?
Yeah.
Is that not working?
Other ways to make connections is UPAA, which I mentioned earlier. It's a great resource for referrals and knowledge sharing about the industry too. So I definitely look them up. Okay.
Yeah, we can put a link in the chat for that. How do you go about connecting with portrait subjects within time constraints? It's a good question.
Yeah, that's fun, because the one yesterday that I did for Clemson, and thankfully Craig, who I think was on the meeting, really get started with those earlier, pretty early on. So we started talking about this one that we did yesterday about 2 months ago. And part of that was because the subject that they wanted photographed, it comes in from North Carolina, so she's only in the DC office a few days a month. So it was, him connecting us together and then working out like which dates would fit within the publication time frame. And that gives us some flexibility, but most of the time with me directly communicating with the subject, but keeping my client in the loop about the progress of the coordination, that sort of thing. And I typically, design my shoots such that they go pretty fast. I would say I'm very good at getting a lot done in like 45 minutes to an hour. But if you give me more time than that, then I just start coming up with the same thing over and over again.
And do you visit the location ahead of time?
Sometimes, the one at the Ronald Reagan building, I'd been there before, and so I had some ideas and I had some time to go back and check it out. The one I did yesterday, I hadn't been there because it's just like their office for a nonprofit, but they were able to send me some pictures of the office so I could have a sense of what the space looked like. For 30 Rock, there was not going to be a way that we could wander around for scouting, so I kind of had to envision in my mind what it might look like, and maybe watch some episodes of the sitcom to scout it out. But basically, we got in there, and thankfully she had a lot of time, so we can be like, okay, let's do a quick walkthrough and then figure out a plan. And that was sort of the case for the one on Broadway as well. I have an idea of what a theater looks like because I did a lot of stage crew in junior high and high school, so I could guess what the space looked like, but we just sort of played around in there and had the time to do that. And then otherwise, if it's going to be an outdoor location, I'll look at it on Google Street View to get a sense of what things look like. But I don't always have an opportunity to directly scout.
So how often do you hire assistants? Is it mostly for these portrait shoots, or is it for anything?
It really depends on the situation and what's going on. So for a couple of the Clemson ones, I had assistants with me that were helping me out on other jobs that I was doing. The two in New York, I had assistants that were with me working on other jobs, so I attached them to the project as well because I knew it would go faster. I knew I didn't want to wander around 30 Rock with a bunch of gear alone. And same with the one in the Ronald Reagan building, because I knew I wanted to move fast. The one yesterday, I knew we were basically confined to a smaller office, so I did that one alone. It really depends on the logistics, and whether or not an art director is going to be there and whether or not they're willing to hold a light if I ask them to. So the image library days for the University of Virginia, I don't work with an assistant, but the two art directors that I've worked with there, actually, and the other communications people that I've worked with there, have always been happy to hold a light or a reflector if I need them to, so that we could keep pace with the job. But it's basically figuring out how to move quickly and get the job done without using too many resources.
So what is your typical turnaround time for image delivery?
Oh, people are going to hate me about this. It depends on the job, because some of them, like for the Loyola graduation, during that 75 minutes that 1,300 graduates were walking across, I took about 10 minutes out of that to download some images to the iPad and push about maybe 40 or 50 of them to their social media team, and then turn the whole thing around, I think, in a day. So generally I try and take about no more than 2 or 3 days to turn a job around, but usually next day.
So, okay, so in May, when you have a crazy schedule, how do you juggle all of the emails I'm sure you're getting, all of your clients, the images? How do you stay organized and then also have some sort of home life as well?
So the answer is, first, as far as the home life, my 8-year-old son was not so happy with me because he hardly saw me. I was terrified that I was going to show up to the wrong university for the wrong job. But a lot of that, making sure that I end up in the right place, is a lot of pre-planning and trying to do a lot of that ahead of time. So I start nagging my clients for planning calls 6 weeks to a month ahead of time, so that we can get the runs of show together and the shot lists and all that sort of stuff. So the week before all of that crazy 2 weeks, I had already put all of that into my calendar and my notes and my checklists and everything, so that when I show up, I could just pull out my phone and pull up my notes and know what I'm supposed to do. And as long as I showed up at the correct university, I, I was doing the right thing. So, yeah.
That must be pretty challenging.
Yeah, this past year, that was probably the worst that it's ever been. Well, worst, best, however you want to look at it. It was rough, but it was a lot of fun because there was a lot of the event stuff, but then a lot of more of the creative work that I got to do as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a nice mix of clients, even though they're all sort of within the university realm. There's so many different types of photography that you do, which is it was really interesting to hear, because you hear a university photographer and you have like a certain idea in your head, and then you do all of it, which is super, super interesting.
Yeah, and the people that you get to work with, there are times that I get to work on a team with other like staff photographers and freelancers to cover bigger events. And all of these staff photographers are just phenomenally skilled and jack of all trades, master at all of them somehow, and very friendly, collegial people, despite being massively overworked and underpaid. But yeah, it's really a lot of really great disciplines to get to play around in, and as you show your value to a university, they generally keep calling.
Great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up? Does anyone have any more questions?
I just really, I'm just, also trying to keep up with reading some of these notes. I really appreciate people's comments. Thanks, Craig and Adam and everyone. It's been great to collaborate with you all, and I'm glad we got to share some of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for sharing your work and the behind the scenes of how you do this work. It's really fascinating. I hope everyone enjoyed this. Please come to some of our next events. They're available on our website at apadc.com. And we look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Yeah,
All right.
to join. I guess I'm the one to talk to as the membership chair.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to give a little spiel about membership, go for it, Sam.
I mean, the APADC has been just such a great community. I mean, the people here have been really wonderful to get to know, and really supportive. Environment for photographers, a collegial place where we can all share how to do our jobs better, and that we're not all alone floating in our own little world. So I'm glad that we have these opportunities to share.
Yeah, great.
Everyone, appreciate it.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. Hope to see you soon. Enjoy your summer, and we're gonna sign off now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.